9 failures, 9 exits, and then 1 breakthrough. Dan R.'s journey proves that the right vocation isn't found overnight, but through persistence and resilience. Welcome to Part 22, Finding the Right Fit. Today we uncover how Dan R. turned repeated setbacks into millionaire success before the age of 40. Finding the right fur. Dan R.'s story isn't as straightforward as mine. How did he reach millionaire status before he was 40, earning more than $1 million in 1 year, a status earned by only 1 in every 1,000 households? In America, many factors contributed to Dan's success, and many trials and errors were involved. He was very wise when he eventually selected the ideal vocation. Dan is like the vast majority of first-generation millionaires because most will tell you they selected the perfect vocation. For people who are interested in becoming wealthy in one generation, the perfect vocation is the one that allows full use of their abilities and aptitudes. 9 jobs. It took Dan R. quite a long time to introduce himself to the other 10 members of the focus group. Halfway through his presentation, I almost stopped him because I thought the recruiter had made a mistake. Dan was supposed to be a millionaire who succeeded because of his high performance skills as a sales professional, but in his introduction all he talked about was a series of sales positions where he either underperformed or was fired. I thought Dan was in the wrong place that night, but I let him continue, and it was a good thing I didn't interrupt. He actually documented 9 poor performance jobs before he described how he eventually succeeded in his 10th time at bat. Consider Dan's path to finding the ideal vocation. Position 1. After graduating from a top business school with a degree in marketing, Dan took a job with a corporation selling calculators and electronic watches to large retailers. I never seemed to get the knack of it. Didn't sell a lot. After 2 years I was asked to resign. Position 2. Dan then went to work for a major producer of electronic games, but once again I couldn't get the knack of selling and they asked me to leave about a year and a half later. Position 3. Hired by a startup computer company, Dan resigned after 9 months of never selling one computer. Position 4. Dan was hired by a small computer company. He didn't sell much of their product either and resigned after a few months on the job. Position 5. Dan's 5th position was also with a computer company. He didn't meet his sales quota and again was asked to resign. Position 6. In Dan's next job, I was really doing well because I wasn't in sales. 1 was in marketing. But 9 months later, the company ran out of money and went out of business. Position 7. Dan accepted a sales position with a startup computer company and made only $45,000 annually until the last year I was there. I made $200,000. But then the market slowed up, and the company went out of business. Position 8. Dan accepted another sales job, but the company had problems with me because of low sales volume. Position 9. Dan hired on with a company that produces scanners at cash registers. They let me go. I wasn't the only one who thought Dan was in the wrong place. The fellow who sat next to him laughingly blurted out the following comment after Dan's story of Position 5. I don't want to sit next to this guy anymore. Finally, at Position 10, Dan's search for the ideal vocation paid dividends. 6 years ago, He found a unique career that closely fit his abilities and aptitudes. He landed a job that was entitled sales professional, but it was much more than selling as defined by most of his previous positions. This job not only required Dan to close major deals, it also called for considerable market planning, understanding of each customer's unique needs, preparing detailed proposals, and, most important, focusing on major accounts. It gave Dan a lot of discretion in how he pursued business. In reality, Dan viewed his position as being more of a market consultant than merely a sales caller. Almost immediately after he began working in his 10th position, Dan recognized that he had been ill-suited to his previous jobs. They were purely sales positions, and Dan was consistently outperformed by other sales professionals because he is a thinker, not a sales commando. The most successful sales professionals were those who aggressively called on the largest number of prospective customers. Pre-planning was relegated to making appointments, but Dan was often kidded by his fellow sales professionals as one with many plans, few clients. Dan is more than a strategic planner. He has an extraordinary ability to uncover major market opportunities and generate millions of dollars in revenue from these opportunities. But it took 9 experiences with other employment situations before Dan fully conceptualized his definition of the ideal position. During these 9 equivalents of the stations of the cross, he often agonized. I would sit in my car and drive all around. I would get so depressed because I had all this drive and was a really hard worker. I was letting myself down and my parents down. Dan intuitively knew that there was an ideal vocation somewhere. That's why he kept looking for the opportunity that would allow him to fully utilize his aptitude as a highly intelligent and gifted marketer. If I could just find the right product and the right opportunities, I could do well. Dan realized that the computer industry gives major compensation to top-performing marketers, but that was too broad a description. It was like trying to find someone's room in a large hotel. Dan had the correct address for the hotel, but he didn't have the room number. So within the domain of marketer of computer systems, Dan began his search for the ideal combination of company, compensation package, product, and target market. He never regrets his previous experiences working in sales. For 9 other employers, they help him conceptualize his ideal vocation. 6 years ago, Dan was convinced that he'd discovered the right opportunity, one that allowed full use of his abilities. Why did he waste his time working in 9 previous positions that were unsuitable, given his aptitude and abilities? According to Dan, it took some experience with situations that were less than ideal for him to appreciate the right vocation. But he knew that he would always be the marginally productive man in sales if he remained in any of his previous positions. I would be still selling watches and calculators if I was marginally good. What was different in my case was I became a good searcher of opportunities, searcher of future, or just different niche markets. A man is repeatedly fired or resigns because he fails to meet sales quotas, and then he turns around and becomes one of America's best paid, most productive revenue generators. Dan knows the reason for his success. For the last 17 years I have been searching. I'm a good searcher. I've been practicing how to search for opportunities and to look at my business in a certain way. And that's what I'm still doing today. I found this company. My first year I made $200,000. My second another $200,000. This success encouraged Dan to work even harder at being really focused. He realized that he'd found his niche, his marketing orientation perfectly matched the needs of his current employer, who manufactures, markets, and distributes custom-designed handheld computers. This past December, after planning, for 5 years and getting no orders from Home Depot, I received a $35 million contract from Home Depot, selling 6,000 handheld computers to them. My W-2 read $1,033,000 commission on that check. When Dan made this statement, every one of the focus group members clapped and cheered. Everyone was a self-made millionaire, and each had a similar story. They had great empathy for Dan's journey to success. Contrary to what you might expect, Dan is not constantly stressed out by his intense productive efforts. As most millionaires report, stress is a direct result of devoting a lot of effort to a task that's not in line with one's abilities. It's more difficult, more demanding mentally and physically, to work in a vocation that's unsuitable to your aptitude. It's even worse if you know that you are a round peg assigned to working square holes. Add the realization that your vocation has little or no probability of making you wealthy, and you are stressed out big time. Dan will tell you that it was more stressful earning $45,000 per year as a marginally productive sales commando than it is closing multimillion-dollar deals in his current environment. Two leading scholars recently studied the relationship between the task environment and intelligence. Intelligent people are more likely to rely on intellectual effort in solving problems than those who have relatively low intelligence. Fred E. Fiedler and Thomas G. Link, leader, intelligence, interpersonal stress, and task performance, in R. J. Steinberg and R. K. Wagner, eds, Mind in Context, Interactionist Perspectives on Human Intelligence, New York, Cambridge University Press, 1994, p. 163. One of the reasons Dan currently performs so well is that his employer appreciates his combination of aptitudes and abilities, while most of his previous employers did not. They preferred sales personnel who knocked down doors if necessary to gain immediate sales revenues. But Dan was too creative, too analytical, too deliberate, too intelligent to perform at a high level of productivity in the don't think, just sell situation. The stressful situations require quick and preferably automatic responses. Careful deliberation and weighing of alternatives will impede rather than assist with solution of the problem. Thus, intelligence will correlate negatively with performance. They see, but they don't see. Don spent more than an hour mulling over the comments from the other 10 members of my focus group interview. I could tell he was deep in thought as he listened to the other self-made millionaires talk about choice of vocation and economic opportunity. I was especially interested in what Don would say. He'd started a successful business more than 25 years ago and has had 3 other highly successful businesses since then. How did Don explain his 444 hitting streak? You must be an opportunist. You must be an opportunist. Everyone in this room is an opportunist. In your business, Dr. Stanley, how did you get into the book business? We all have different stories, but we all had an opportunity. Does this mean that successful people are merely lucky, Did they just happen to walk into the opportunity of a lifetime? Are unsuccessful people those who just never came across a significant economic opportunity? Don asked the same rhetorical questions of the group, and all fully agreed with his answers. Everybody out there has an opportunity to get into business. The opportunity to sell somebody something. Some can't see it. You have to be able to see it. Don's discussion about seeing economic opportunity was almost word for word from the biography of Eric Hartmann, the successful fighter pilot, Raymond F. Tolliver and Trevor J. Constable, the Blonde Knight of Germany, Blue Ridge Summit, PA, Aero Books, 1970, pp 43, 44, 84, 85. Major Hartmann often commented about combat blindness. He wondered why so many pilots had difficulty seeing the enemy target of opportunity, and he had the same problem as a rookie. How is it possible, he asked, that pilots with extraordinary eyesight, measured ophthalmologically, have combat blindness? These same pilots could read every letter on an eye chart at greater distances than normal, but they could not see in real combat conditions. Hartmann said it best. They see, but they don't see. This is the same message Don related to the group. Don pointed out that some of the brightest people never see an opportunity staring them in the face. They received all A's on tests in college, like the fighter pilots, who got all A's on eye tests. But unless you are experienced, trained, and really want to see an opportunity, you will always have combat or economic blindness. Although many people think it's a genetic trait that explains the ability to see targets of opportunity, I firmly believe people can be taught to see what others do not see, based on scientific measures, eye charts, depth perceptions, and so forth. Hartmann's eyesight didn't change much during his more than 1,400 combat missions, but his ability to see targets improved tremendously with the help of his mentors and with more and more experience. Also, he trained himself to focus his receptors in areas of the sky where he anticipated his targets would be concentrated. He could spot aircraft at a phenomenal distance, sometimes minutes before anyone else. Airborne with him, Tolliver and Constable, P. The vision of first-generation Americans. Think of the opportunity issue from another perspective. During the 1970s, fewer than 14 households in 1,000 had incomes of $100,000 or more, but certain groups had a greater proportion. For example, according to my analysis of 1970s data provided by the U.S. Census, Korean Americans were about 3 times more likely to have six-figure incomes than the typical American household. The economic success enjoyed by a disproportionately large number of Korean American households was a direct result of their ability to see economic opportunities that others overlooked. This may seem amazing, given their backgrounds, because most were first generation to this country and were not college educated. Also, English was a foreign language to them. Few inherited any of their economic wealth. Their incomes came from earned sources as opposed to trust accounts. How is it possible that a group of recent arrivals to America saw significant economic opportunities, while at the same time most native-born Americans see, but they don't see? For several years I ran an experiment in my university classes. I asked all my undergraduate, graduate, and executive MBA students this question: What are the top 10 most profitable small businesses in America? Time and time again my students were unable to come up with even one correct answer. This ignorance about the economic opportunities in America among some of our brightest students is not for lack of genetic intelligence. I believe there are several reasons. One is that most business majors have no intention of starting their own business. They plan to work for some major corporation, so profitability is someone else's problem. Another reason is that most students are never taught about the inherent profitability of various types of businesses, perhaps because most textbook writers and professors think that profitability numbers are not technically challenging to students. But there is an even more compelling reason why our students cannot see what recent immigrants can see about significant economic opportunity. Hartman said it best, one's ability to see a target is a function of experience, training, and need. Who needs to know about the variation in profits among countless categories of business? Our sons and daughters, the well-educated, confident, and easily employed, or they first-generation Korean Americans? The answer is clear. Korean Americans came to this country with a strong desire to become financially independent. In their minds, they had one chance to accomplish the goal. Owning and operating a business was the only highway open to them. Many first-generation Korean Americans correctly chose the businesses that have a high probability of success and high profits. There are numerous Korean trade associations and Korean American cultural organizations that provide this type of information. Also, there is an informal interpersonal communication network between successful business owners and those who want to start their own enterprise. The information it supplied appears to have been quite accurate. Among the most profitable categories of business in America during the 1970s was dry cleaning. Note that there are so many Korean Americans in the dry cleaning business today that one industry trade journal publisher had no choice but to publish two versions, one in English and the other in Korean. There are many other categories of businesses that have been prime targets for perceptive Korean Americans. Just walk down Main Street, USA, and you will get a good view of the economic opportunities that some see and others ignore. Korean Americans have become a major force within a variety of profitable business categories such as fruit and vegetable retailing and wholesaling, shoe repair, and convenience markets. They also know that if they provide a good product or service at a competitive price, they can have high expectations of economic success. In turn, economic success translates into financial independence. Seeing is not enough. Most first-generation millionaires have told me that recognition of an opportunity does not automatically translate into dollars. There must be something else in the equation. Don, a self-made millionaire, said it concisely. You have to be able to see it, then you have to believe you can do it. Belief in one's ability to succeed is a very big foundation stone. It explains much of the variation in performance among people in the vast American economy. In turn, belief in oneself is a direct result of knowing the odds are stacked in one's favor. A more detailed discussion of belief in oneself is given in Chapter 4, The Relationship Between Courage and Wealth. Why do so many businesses fail within a year or two of opening? Certainly one reason is the odds issue. Most people who select a category of business to operate don't have a clue about the real probabilities of success. Remember, it isn't how much you study and how long, it's also what you study and how well it can be leveraged in the business world. Knowing the odds of success can make all the difference. Pick a long shot and your college degree may not be enough to save you. Pick a winner, and the law of economics may not punish you for never spending a day in college, never fully mastering the English language, and being born outside the United States. Don also spoke of the importance of desire. One must be highly motivated to succeed in a particular vocation. You have to have something inside of you that wants to kill. You go out and take that opportunity, that chance. You are king of the mountain. He explained that the something inside of you that wants to kill is an emotion or instinct that is vocation specific. In other words, he believes that there is some very specific vocation, product, or service out there that will excite each of us, but if we lack this emotion, this killer instinct, it's unlikely that our venture will be productive. Don feels that most people possess some of this instinct, but for many, it remains dormant throughout their entire lives because they never encounter the catalyst of the ideal vocation or economic opportunity. Thus, the enormous power of this emotion will never be exploited. Every product in all of Don's 4 businesses was a labor of love. He loved conceptualizing the products based on his assessment of market needs, and he felt strong positive emotions about product development, design, and marketing. Without this enormous emotional energy, Don will tell you, none of his products would be a reality today. Don's emotional energy made what would be viewed as hard work by others fun for him. The risks and lifestyle sacrifices that he took as a young entrepreneur rarely entered his mind. They were easily suppressed by focusing his mind on the product and business that excited him. There is a simple lesson that can be learned from Don's experiences. Extraordinary levels of economic productivity can be accomplished by searching for and finding the vocation that evokes and conjures up emotional energy. But Don will also state that it's important for one's vocation to have significant profitability, and this, in turn, can be altered by one's enthusiasm and ability to sell. Unfortunately, this can be overestimated when strong love of a product blinds its creator. That's precisely why everyone needs objective third parties to evaluate ideas. Trusted advisors, often enlightened CPAs or attorneys, are very valuable resources. They have experience in separating emotion from economic reality. One of Don's main advisors is his accountant. Following Don's discussion about emotional energy, another respondent made a valuable contribution to the interview. He defined other reasons for Don's success. You have the best description of your product. You did a wonderful job of explaining your company, your technology, and how your products work. You understand the technology, the fit in the market, and how it's going to benefit somebody else. Some people fall in love with a particular product idea, and that love can bias our own assessment of market demand. Don's love is not only for product concepts, his emotion is firmly rooted in his accurate estimate of the market's strong need for his product. His motivation is a direct result of envisioning buyers being able to solve problems with his technology, and that is, in essence, why he is a success today. He has great empathy for the needs of the market, and he is literally thrilled when his technology fills these needs. The market environments in America are very democratic. They reward people like Don who fill a need, and it doesn't matter if Don is tall or short, wide or narrow, male or female, white or black. This is especially true in the entrepreneurial environment, but it also applies in situations where employees are paid on the basis of performance, such as in full commission sales positions. The market does not care. So what if a person worked for 9 other companies, did not receive all A's in college, and never read Amy Vanderbilt's book on etiquette? As another respondent stated in the same focus group, I think the irony of it all is that you don't have to look like the corporate guys who have to look good. Don agreed that corporations hire executives who are ambassadors. They are symbols of excellence, so they must be handsome, well-grounded, educated, well-dressed, politically oriented, personable, and articulate. But according to Don, they aren't required to have his same level of killer instinct or his need to develop successful new ideas for the marketplace. At one time, he had a very different view about the corporate environment. 1. Grew up in a blue-collar background. Graduated with a degree in applied physics. I went to work for a big company. Always dreamed of going up the corporate ladder and being some high executive. Executives in corporate structures just didn't live up to what I thought they would. I put them on a pedestal. I got really discouraged being around them and the things they did. So, I started my own company. I was 29 years old. Don learned how businesses operate from his corporate experiences. But the most important thing he learned was that a vocation in the corporate world would never light his emotional fire. This knowledge helped him define the vocation where his talents and aptitudes would be best suited. Without his corporate experience, Don might never have decided to go out on his own. A.G. Eneric. A. Arthur. A member of my audience recently asked me, "What about your vocation?" You emphasize the importance of specialization and that choice of vocation is a critical element in accounting for variations in wealth. But you, yourself, are in a very competitive vocation. Are you guilty of not practicing what you are preaching? No, I'm innocent, but let me prove my point. I estimate that there are several 100,000 authors in America. If I had to compete directly with each of them, I'd go out of business in short order. I am not a generic author. My vocation is not ever listed as writer. In fact, I am a specialist within the large population of authors and writers. I write about how common people become wealthy in one generation. I write about topics that others overlook. I am the Mr. Richard of literature. Even Webster's defines vocation as the special function of an individual or group. It may be easy to say this now, since I've already written a bestseller. Hindsight is always 20/20. But I never doubted that the Millionaire Next Door would be a hit. I planned this work for many years. I tested my ideas in hundreds of seminars across America. I knew that 2 major concepts turned on the attendees. First, I defined who the American millionaire was and was not. Second, I describe how common people become millionaires in one generation. For several years within the past 7, I received requests to do more than 200 seminars and speeches on these 2 topics. Why all this interest? It was because I had information that no one else possessed. Not just information, but survey-based insights into how to Become financially independent. The responses from my audiences and the insights millionaires gave me refined my job description. My work provides answers to questions asked by many people, and when it comes to competitors, I am like Mr. Richard's listing in the telephone book. One of the millionaires featured in Money Magazine's cover story on the Millionaire Next Door said it best. Mr. John Schmiljenko is a real estate investor. He was asked about the source of his wisdom about becoming wealthy. Playing Monopoly as a kid, I bought properties because they were cheap. I took a similar approach in real life. Tony Cook, 7 Secrets to Achieve Your Money Dreams. Money, June 1997, p76. It was the millionaire respondents who encouraged me to specialize, to monopolize. I would never have succeeded as a writer of love stories, mysteries, or any other type of generic fiction. Some of my relatives remind me that the Stanley ancestry is filled with writers and poets dating back to ancient Ireland. They think success is a genetic factor, but I don't think that the quality of the writing explains the demand for the millionaire next door. Where were all these ancestors' genes when I was getting straight CS in high school and college English and writing courses? The big issue is what is said, not how it is said. The market I selected defines what I do. I know from thousands of contact hours with the public what it is they want. I know the questions they want answered. With this knowledge in hand, I always felt confident about the demand for my work. You don't need to be Shakespeare if you have excellent market research. The basic premise of my vocation is giving the market what it wants and is not currently receiving from other authors. It's that simple. I do feel just a bit guilty about the success of my bestseller. There must be thousands of students who never made it onto the New York Times bestseller list, let alone stayed there for more than 100 weeks. On the other hand, most of these writers repeatedly ignore rule number 1 in marketing. Me, is dull, dull, dull. It's the A student who, more often than not, writes beautifully and states concepts with great elegance. His works are grammatically sound, but his criteria for selecting a theme is strictly me. He writes about things that are of interest to him and forgets about the interests of the market. So what? If you write beautifully but your main theme is strictly Dollsville? Or, what if there are so many competitors in your subject area that you cannot even get a publisher to take a second look at your manuscript? I have the best of both worlds. I have great interest in my main topic area, and the market demand is strong for my work. But I must admit that my first love was American history. Long ago, however, I realized that the level of competition in this area is extremely high. What if I attempted to publish in the arena of American history? I would be living proof that me is dull, dull, dull. Of course, I can offset my guilt about being successful by reminding myself about my investment in time, energy, and money. I have a few million frequent flyer miles. That's the number it takes to visit millionaires who want to tell their success story. That's the requirement for addressing hundreds of audiences and asking for advice and suggestions. So, in many ways, the ideas in The Millionaire Next Door and The Millionaire Mind are the product of my personal hands-on market research, the type that few writers ever have a chance to conduct. Occasionally, I've had the chance to advise other writers about theme selection, and other marketing issues. However, most believe that what I'm suggesting is blasphemy. I recently attended a book fair with more than 20 other published authors, some of whom at one time or another taught creative writing, and several were professors of English. I really felt way out of place, but I said to myself, Tom, every one of these people can write, that is, state concepts, better than you. But not one of them ever had a book on the bestseller list. Several of the authors who taught creative writing clustered together in a corner. They spoke of style, creativity, and the burden of grading 130 papers this term. One of them told me that he really had little time to contemplate, to give deep thought to the theme of his next work. But he will have to come up with something soon. It's still publish or perish in his business. The best part of his energy resources are given to commuting, faculty meetings, teaching, and grading papers. What energy remains is allocated to his next book. I strongly believe that it's nearly impossible to write effectively if the book is relegated to a third or fourth priority. Some of these insights originated in the School of Hard Knocks. Others were gathered from reading about productive people. In fact, for many years I looked for a template of productivity that I could follow. I never found it. Much has been written about the productivity of groups and businesses, but writing is an individual event. It's different from corporate sports. Even many of the biographies of great team leaders and economically productive business people do not apply to my vocation. 1. The types of businesses owned and managed by the respondents to this survey are given in Appendices 2 and 3. 1A complete list of the businesses owned or managed by the millionaires surveyed is included in the appendix.